right, so this is an action-packed day with all the action that we are virtually witnessing on the TechCon day. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope right from tweeting, sharing in your experiences on social media, to exploring the photo wall, the signature wall and everything that's around it, I am sure you are making it and feeling all good at the same time. So up and onwards towards our next session, which reads as by, of, and for the people. Does data science for good have to be really unprofitable? Now, this is something we will probe into. So allow me to please rope in our next speaker who has really flown in the skies and virtually so. Allow me to please welcome Carmine Paolino, the co-founder and chief technology officer, FreshFlow. Over to you, Mr. Paolino.
Hi, thank you very much for the kind introduction. So I am Carmine Paolino. As we said, I'm the co-founder and CTO of FreshFlow. And today I'm going to answer this seemingly simple question. Does data science for good has to be unprofitable? Well, let me first start with a story of myself. So at the beginning, I really like computer science. I really like computer science since I was a kid. And I studied computer science. I then studied artificial intelligence, and I went for a career as a data scientist. I was a data scientist for 5 years, but then after 5 years, I accumulated some wealth, I was feeling comfortable, and naturally, I think, like many other people, I would start to be in search of purpose. And fortunately, at that time, an offer fell on my lap. So one of my co-workers at Prosus, an OLX group, he proposed to be a technical mentor for the Data Science for Social Good program. And this Data Science for Social Good program was fantastic, and it was the right time to do it. So I immediately said yes. So what is Data Science for Social Good? This is a program created by Raid Ghani, which was the chief scientist for Barack Obama in 2012. And it basically creates an environment where it brings students and organizations that have data problems, such as the World Bank, such as Ofsted, which is the Office for Standards of Early Years Childcare and Nurseries in the UK, and many, many others organizations, including the White House, etc., with students that have just graduated from their bachelor or their master or even their PhD, and brings them together with technical mentors like myself that teach them how to do data science in the real world. So it creates not only like students that are prepared for the real world, but also organizations will receive like an immense amount of data analytics that were impossible before, and they can really expand their projects in that sense. And we worked on 2 projects. One was for the World Bank, and the other one was for Ofsted, the Office for Early Years Childcare and Nurseries. And what I've noticed is that while the SSG is fantastic, and there are many other initiatives like that, such as DataCon, you can do Kaggle competitions, there's Data for Good, there's Driven Data, even Omdena. These organizations are mostly nonprofit, and they're rather expensive. And even though this is what we think about as data scientists, is there really all there is? Does data science for social good has to always be unprofitable? Well, permit me to expand the questions a little bit, because as we know, data science permeated nearly every industry that generates or relies on data. So do businesses that prioritize higher purposes have to be unprofitable? So if we look at over the decades, management teams and investors have adhered to the shareholder value theory, which was popularized in 1970 by Milton Friedman. And Friedman argued that companies' only responsibility is to maximize shareholder value, in effect, to make money for the folks holding their stock. And proponents of shareholder value maximization put the pursuit of profit and shareholder returns above all other considerations. So pursuing profit is not inherently problematic. After all, without profits, we would go bankrupt. But during the years, and what are we experiencing right now, is a change and a disruption in the way that people are thinking. And for an increasing number of businesses and their employees, their pursuit of profit is no longer enough. Such as myself when I was searching for projects that do something for good. And why purpose is becoming more important? First of all, there is a trust deficit. So one legacy of the 2008 banking crisis is a dwindling sense of public trust in corporations, and distribution of wealth and opportunity being increasingly perceived as unequal and unfair. In fact, there is while the world is getting richer, inequality across the globe is on the rise, and actually is an historical high. Of the world population, 1% controls 50% of the planet's wealth. And the pay gap between corporate executives and employees is also widening. Peter Drucker once warned that a CEO to worker pay ratio of more than 20:1 will increase employee resentment and decrease morale, while in some US organizations in 2014, for example, that ratio was 350:1. And of course, this is not going to noticed. Also, climate change is really high on the societal agenda. So more corporations are under public and regulatory scrutiny about their environmental impact. And this is not only just thanks to influencers such as Greta Thunberg, but also pressure from the governments and from the UN itself. In fact, we know that the UN has the Sustainable Development Goals, which, for example, dictate the halving of food waste in 2030. And of course, whenever a business does something wrong in the eyes of the public, social media rises, and social media is so fast at spreading disinformation that not even news organization can do it that fast. And it's also, there is a demand for longer term thinking. People that are somehow comfortable in their lives, employees that have worked for, let's say, 5 years and they have some wealth accumulated, they're trying to see where they can make an impact in the future. And they're trying to see if there are any companies that have a so-called triple bottom line or double bottom line. And they're asking, or they're asking their companies to address these long-term global environmental and social challenges. And so these forces mean that many employees, customers, investors, communities, and other stakeholders are asking profound questions about the structure of society and the role of corporations within it. But all of these needs, they don't have to be in conflict. Investments in people may have short-term costs, but that kind of long-term thinking is critical in a world of inclusive growth. These were the words of Mark Weinberg, the global CEO and chairman of EY. And he continued, indeed, one of the business's most important contribution to society is driving sustainable long-term growth while investing in solutions for the challenges of tomorrow. And the good news is that businesses today are finding that doing good also means doing well. And this is why Friedman's perspective and the prevailing views of the world today, they're not entirely in conflict. In fact, companies with an established sense of purpose, one that is measured in terms of social impact, in terms of community growth, in terms of climate change impact, outperformed the S&P 500 by 10 times between 1997 and 2011. And in the context of the corporations, of course, this mindset reflects a growing desire by stakeholders at all levels in the organization to have a purpose beyond the balance sheet. Indeed, 90% of today's executives recognize the importance of having an aspirational reason for being, which inspires and provides a call to action for an organization and provides benefit to society. And this was according to Harvard Business Review Analytics Services EY's survey. So what are the other upsides of having a business purpose? Well, another recent study by EY showed that in a survey of 1,470 global leaders for businesses, of annual revenues of $2.5 billion or more, 66% of them said that they are profoundly rethinking their organization's purpose. And around 97% of companies that deeply integrate a broader sense of purpose into their DNA reported a good or great deal of incremental value from doing so, while 60% says it gives them the agility to innovate in times of disruption. Let me really drive that point home. So 58% of firms that prioritize business purpose are growing at 10% plus, compared to 42% of firms without a clearly articulated purpose. And it's not only about growing so fast and making more money. It's also about expanding geographically. The companies with a clearly articulated purpose are more successful in expanding geographically. It's also about changing top leadership, launching new products, executing mergers and acquisitions, engaging in major transformation initiatives. And there's even data about customer loyalty. 88% of executives said that clearly articulated purpose helps increase customer loyalty. 72% of global consumers will recommend a company that has a purpose. And this is probably because of social media itself. 84% of emerging market consumers make a cause-related purpose at least annually. So clearly, there is a lot of upside doing that. Now, what are the other things that are happening in the world? Is it just companies and consumers? Well, not only. There's also a new trend towards socially responsible investing. But is it a new trend, really? Actually, if we look at socially responsible investing, which is the precursor of ESG investing, well, it sprang from a niche investment strategy that emerged in the 1960s and the 1970s, and around the same time as Friedman's shareholders' value theory. For decades, Friedman's shareholder value theory has been upheld because investors have been enjoying hefty returns. But modern investors are increasingly realizing that shortchanging shareholders to juice shareholders' returns is too high a price for society to pay. A company's stakeholders are not just its shareholders and its employees, but they are also include its customers, suppliers, distributors, communities, neighbors, and the environment too. And shareholder value theory, perhaps ironically, ignores the basic fact that shareholders may also have other types of stakes in the companies in which they invest. Shoddy treatment of stakeholders who are also shareholders presents financial risk, since those poorly treated stakeholders have the power to damage the company by selling their shares. And this collective realization helps to explain why socially responsible investing and other ethically focused investing strategy have grown in popularity. So as we see, there's not just the businesses that are looking at this, but also the investors. And not just the investors and the business, but also the employees. And now, in today's age, ESG investing is becoming more mainstream. But what is ESG investing? ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And research increasingly shows that this kind of investing method can reduce portfolio risk, generate competitive investment returns, and helping investors feel good about the stocks that they own. And the COVID-19 pandemic has only strengthened the case for ESG investing. The resulting market turbulence further produced further evidence that the stocks of companies with strong performance on ESG issues are often less volatile. The pandemic has also raised public awareness of and support for social issues that fall under the ESG purview, such as worker health and safety. But what does ESG investing entails? Well, first of all, E is for environmental. So ESG investors are looking for climate change policies, plans, and disclosures. They're looking for greenhouse gas emission goals and transparency about how the company is meeting these goals. Carbon footprint and carbon intensity in terms of pollutions and emissions are also very, very important for ESG investors. Also, water-related issues and goals such as usage, conservation, overfishing, waste disposal, recycling, green products, technology, infrastructure, relationship and past history with the environmental protection agencies and other environmental regulatory bodies, and also environmental benefits for employees. For example, bicycle commuting rewards and other environmentally based incentives. These are now all integrated inside many financial products, such as the Bloomberg Terminal, where you can find a tab specifically related for ESG investing. What is S? S stands for social. Social talks about employee treatment, pay, benefits, and perks, employee engagement and staff turnover, employee training and development, employee safety policies, diversity and inclusion, ethical supply chain sourcing, such as conflict-free minerals and responsibly sourced food and coffee, mission or higher purpose or lack thereof, customer service friendliness and responsiveness, performance history for consumer protection issues, including lawsuits, recalls, and regulatory penalties, public stance on social justice issues, as well as lobbying efforts. And G stands for corporate governance. So we are talking about executive compensation, bonuses, perks, including whether executive receive large bonuses when they leave the company, compensation tied to metrics that drive long-term business value, diversity of the board of directors, potential for conflicts of interest, proxy access, managing shareholders' ability to put forth a board of director candidates, whether the company's chairman and CEO roles are separate, transparency of communication within shareholders, etc., etc. And as you can see, all of these characteristics are cared by the investors and your employees and the consumers at large, because they will talk in social media, because they will invest in you, because they will stay in your company. And according to the US CIF 2018 report on sustainable, responsible, and impact investing trends, the value of US assets under management that have SRI or ESG-related mandates have jumped 38% since 2016 to $12 trillion. These assets represent 26% of the total assets under management. And in the US. For comparison, when US CIF first measured the value of ESG-focused assets under management in 1995, it was $639 billion. So this segment of investing has increased 18-fold and produced a compound annual growth rate of 13.6%. And of course, we explored already what are the reasons why ESG-focused investing has become more mainstream. And frequently cited reasons that the newer generations have consistently showed a tendency to crave for social responsibility. And also the older generations that are poised to pass their money down their younger generations have continuously strengthened that position of the younger generations in terms of what they are as consumers and who they are as employees and potential founders. Another way that we can actually improve our businesses is to completely revamp the way that we think about purpose and integrate it in our missions. And in focusing on that trend, I would like to go back to my story and talk about what I did after DSSG at the Alan Turing Institute. I joined Entrepreneur First, which is the world's leading talent investor that essentially sources co-founders, potential co-founders, and brings them together, gives them training about how to found a company, and makes sure that there are groups of two co-founders that found companies and then invests in them if they're good enough. And this is how we created FreshFlow. And FreshFlow has this beautiful double or triple bottom line. So in FreshFlow, we try to attack the food waste problem. So food waste is actually, if we would rank food waste amongst countries by CO2 emissions, food waste would be the third country in the world after US and China. And if we have to compare it to India, actually it has doubled the carbon emissions of India. And if we compare it to aviation, it would be 6 times more carbon emissions than the entire aviation industry. Let us sink that for a minute. So in FreshFlow, what we want to do is to help grocery retailers at first, and eventually the entire food supply chain, to waste less food. So how do we do that? We essentially create a product that is an order management product. And it prevents the people on the floor from making the common mistakes in ordering food, which is usually over ordering or under ordering. And it's not that they're malintentioned or they're not good. They're actually very, very good at their job for what they're trying to do. But it's inherently a really, really hard problem. So every single day, each store manager that is ordering food, which is on the floor, has to look at more than 200, sometimes even like thousands of different articles, and look at what is the sales trends, what is going to be the demand for this product in the specific day that the order will come in. They would have to look at the shelf life for these products. They would have to look at the weather. Sometimes even supply chain issues occur. And in fresh products, supply chain issues are actually quite commonplace. And then there are other invisible parameters, such as in the supply chain, maybe the cold chain was violated at some point. Maybe the bananas have been not in the cold when they should have been. That's what it means. Maybe when they were transported by a truck, they just get a bump. These are all unpredictable things. And it's really, really hard for a human to make a correct, perfect prediction. So instead, we use machine learning. And in doing so, we essentially reduce the waste and reduce the stockouts. But what in turns that means is that we create 2 to 4% more top-line revenues for companies. And we're not alone in this pursuit. There are other companies such as Afresh, such as Shelf Engine in the US, or other bigger companies like Relax Solutions and Blue Yonder here in Europe. But food waste is not the only thing that new companies can attack. There's also a direct attack on climate change. Companies like Pachama, for example, are tree tracking companies that, using satellite data, they can track the trees in forestation projects. These forestation projects are used as carbon offsets for other companies. So if company X would actually produce X amount of Y amount of carbon emissions, they can offset that by buying some carbon credits in the Pachama marketplace, for example. And the value add of Pachama is that they would not need, in these forestation projects, they would not need like very expensive verification done manually. So as you can see, there are many, many different ways that we can attack the problem of climate change, and we can have a higher purpose while making money. Thank you very much.
All right, some very fresh perspectives that have just come into the repository. Thank you very much, Mr. Paolino. And with that, we'll be very quickly heading into the next session. But before that, while I just come back on the screen, I would just request all of you to quickly check the Tata Communications booth as well at the Experience Zone. And also, please remember to fill in the feedback forms at the respective booth as well, because that gets you points. And the points in turn on the leaderboard qualify you for your Amazon gift vouchers. So make no mistake on not earning them. So, all right, we will just quickly head into talking about how the future really belongs to the data-driven. Allow me to just come back to you right in a bit.